Hello, my name is Charles Thuo, founder and CEO of Apexloads, and today we're trying to answer one question. So the question is, why logistics? In Africa, there's very many problems. You can look at health, education, hunger, finance. But why did Apexload choose logistics? What's the motivation? And to better answer that question, we have to look at the background of how did I get into logistics in the first place. And it all started, so professionally, I'm an aerospace engineer and in the US, and usually I used to work 40 hours a week, just like everybody, but instead of doing the 8-hour days, I used to do 10-hour days. So I only worked Monday through Thursday. So I always had a 3-day weekend, and I was trying to find a side hustle. So in Kenya itself, I have 2 cousins that are in logistics. So I knew a little bit about logistics and also the potential of, that you can make a lot of money in logistics. So I chose to go into logistics as a side hustle. So what I did, I just took a 2 weeks vacation and we got a commercial driver's license. So we call it a CDL. And the goal was to find a part-time job that I can do Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, kind of like to supplement my income as a entry-level engineer. But after getting the CDL, what I came to realize is that they will not hire you part-time unless you have a year of experience. And also they want you, companies want you to go full-time so they can take the first couple weeks training you, making sure you know how to secure your cargo, you know how to park the truck or pull back on a loading dock and all that kind of stuff. And since I still had my day job at Boeing, I could not go full-time. So what we decided after about like 3 or 4 months of trying to get a job, just decided to start a small trucking company in Oklahoma, and we just bought a truck and started working with drivers. But one of the issues with trucking is drivers. The turnover rate is really high because we do long distance. So that means the driver doesn't get to go home every night or every weekend. Sometimes you have to be gone for 2 or 3 weeks, and sometimes that's a huge stress to some drivers. So the turnover rate is really high. I remember there's this one time I went through 4 drivers in just 6 months. So it's a little hectic. But by that time, I had already seen the potential because it got to a point where I was paying my driver more than I was making in my day job as an engineer, which, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's usually the case. These trucking companies, they do make a lot of money. So what I decided, since I already had the CDL and I already had the truck, so just decided to go full time. And we did that in 2020. But the goal was, if I can make it in 2020, I can make it any other time. And obviously that was a really difficult conversation, especially with my parents, telling them I'm switching from aerospace to go drive a truck. But at the end of the day, we have this issue, as Africans about prestige. People want a job where they get to put on a suit, to go to work. We have that prestige. But to me, I think at the end of the day, all that matters is that can you pay your bills? Can you take care of your family? So to me, that's the most important part. And it made a lot of sense switching from aerospace engineering to logistics. And as we started doing logistics, so like I say, I have 2 cousins that do logistics in Africa, and a lot of time we would compare notes. Like, how do you find cargo and how do you find trucks? And what we came to realize, it's like almost unbelievable. Because if you compare logistics operations in the US and Africa, you can say Africa is generously 10 to 15 years behind, which that's outrageous. And the biggest disappointment is that the solutions are there. And the beautiful thing about logistics is that it's universal. And what I mean by that is logistics in the US, logistics in Europe, or logistics in Africa, it's all the same. You have the same players. You have the shippers, the freight forwarders, the freight brokers, and transporters. So you have the same players, and the relationships are usually the same. Yes, there will be some nuances here and there, cultural differences and all that kind of stuff, but at the basic level, it still involves moving cargo from point A to point B. So that's when we came up with the idea of Apexloads, because just to close that gap, to close that technology gap. We have, like in the US, we do have a few platforms like Apexloads, which are simply matchmakers trying to connect cargo owners to transporters. And I was like, we use these platforms every day. I know how they work, and I can just build one. And that's why we started the development. And the biggest motivation of getting into logistics is because logistics is the backbone of any economy, which was really highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic, whenever they had shutdowns, because if you stop logistics, people are not going to get their medicine, people are not going to get their food, then people were not able to get the mask. So that was kind of like that you call the silver lining for that COVID-19 cloud, that people were able to start that conversation about supply chain. How does supply chain really work? And a lot of people, since if you're not in logistics, you don't really know a lot about logistics. Complicated, but it's really as simple as matching truck with cargo. So if you look at Africa, for instance, every time outside of Africa, whenever you hear Africa, it's always in the context, like people are starving in Africa, people are hungry and all that stuff. But the UN Food and Agriculture Organization did a study, and they found that 50% of all the agricultural produce we produce in Africa goes to waste. And a lot of that is all due to a poor supply chain infrastructure. And the food that we're wasting is enough to feed 300 million people. So if you look at the stats, we don't really need food donations. What we need is governments or the donors to invest in supply chain so we can have a more efficient supply chain. And also climate change. Climate change, it's a really huge topic, and Science Direct did a study and found that transportation accounts for a total of 40% of the CO2 emissions of the continent of Africa. And also, you also got to consider the cost of logistics, because all the transportation costs get added to the final product. And right now, shipping in East Africa is at least 50% higher than in the US. So if you put all that cost towards the cost of the good, the exports from East Africa become very uncompetitive in the world market. So yes, in Africa, there's a lot of problems and the good thing, at least on the logistics, is these solutions exist somewhere, and all we have to do is simply adopt those proven solutions and implement them in Africa so we can close those technology gaps faster. Thank you.